Good morning. Ollie Ollie oxen free. Good morning. Good morning. Liam, good morning. Wolves, good morning. Hello, Inara. All right.
I did the best I could. Same, whatever. Well, okay. Morning, Vivian. Calm before the storm, indeed. The Mighty Becks have joined us. Nice beanie. One arm, Joey. I like me a good beanie. It's an excellent fashion statement. I have been having fun this morning reading a very interesting retelling of World War I called Mud, Blood, and Poppycock. I mean, the title by itself is fabulous. So that was what got me to buy the book. But it's been very interesting. I am intrigued by what is a fairly different perspective on the war here.
Mr. C, how was your Thanksgiving?
Not as filled with turkey and mashed potatoes as I had hoped that it would be. It was good. It was good. Is that you, Gabe? Spent last night reading The War to End All Wars? There's a pair of goose trees. I can't figure out which one you are. Yeah. No, not Treaties, Trenches, Mud, and Blood, which is, although that's very good. Well, here, I have the cover here. I've got the cover here. Mud, Blood, and Poppycock by Gordon Corrigan. There was much pie, so that was good. I mean, if I gotta choose pie first and then stuffing, and then after that the turkey and the mashed potatoes and gravy and all that stuff. The pie was really number one. Like, if you don't have the appropriate level of pie, that's a problem. Good morning, Maxwell. Good to see you. And homemade mac and cheese. Wow, interesting.
The appropriate level of pie is like 6 pies, right?
My father, tired of being reduced to just being able to have slivers of pie after gorging on everything Thanksgiving dinner wise, instituted what is now known in my family, at least, as the Triduum of Pie. A Triduum is a 3-day festival. Okay, so well, I hope technologically we should be better off. I have paid for like the sewer pipe of width of bandwidth here for my broadcasts. So I'm hopeful that actually works. Anyway, so he was tired of eating himself into oblivion at Thanksgiving dinner and then not being able to do justice to the amount of pie that was available. So he instituted the 3-day festival, the Triduum of Pie, which consists of Pie Night, which is the evening before Thanksgiving, in which the family all gather and everyone brings 1 or 2 or now 3 or 4 pies, because everybody wants to, all year long, you sort of look over, this is the new pie I'm going to try to make, and that kind of thing. So we have, it started, the idea behind it was that we would have all 9 kinds of pie that Harold likes best, for those of you who are Harold and the Purple Crayon fans, which should be everybody. But then it's like 20 some odd kinds of pie. I mean, there's 40 or 50 people. We have people who drive hours to show up at Pie Night. So you eat all the pie you want the night before. Then you can have more pie the next day, and then additional leftover pie on Friday, which is the 3rd day of the Triduum of Pie. So we again observed that great festival, and that was wonderful. It was the pie. The pie was good, but we didn't end up with a lot of like leftover turkey, which is a problem because leftover turkey sandwiches are the bomb. And yeah, it was super delicious. I admit, it was super delicious. I was very glad.
Just to see.
Yeah.
You should try doing a pie, turkey, and ham. That way you have more turkey and ham.
Nice. Okay. That's I don't hate that idea. That could be good. Like generally speaking, food is good. I have to eat considerably less of it than I ever have before because once you hit a certain age, you're well, hey, we have a visitor in our class with his lovely red cap. Yeah, I'm gonna. I don't know if the chat does images either, but if you can call it up on your computer, Elizabeth, I'll have you share your screen later. I'll give you privileges. You can share your screen. We can do it that way. Yeah, I like that. I'm trying to drop some poundage. I don't like the shape that I'm in. Most of it's pretty good. I'm still capable of athletic achievements of various kinds, but not as much as I want to be. So I gotta dump a little bit of poundage. I did not, however, gain weight over the Thanksgiving holiday. So that's an achievement right there, I think. Couple other things before we actually get cranked up here. I think pretty much everybody is here. We're at 19. We're usually top out 2021, so I think most of us are probably here. You're probably lost weight over Thanksgiving. You can do that when you are not in the neighborhood of 50. Once you get up to that advanced level of life, it starts being real difficult to regulate what it is that ends up around your middle. So a couple of things. First, I want to congratulate. Here I'm getting an email from somebody asking me if we have class today. Oh, hold on a minute. Jensen's are struggling to get in. Let me see if I can repair this. Actually, hey, Bex, can you email them the link or the meeting ID? Thank you. Let's try that and see if okay. What was I saying? So yeah, I hope your holidays were good. Have a good time. Good food, good company. Did you guys get snow up there? We got truckloads. Well, not where I'm at. Like where I'm at, the snowpocalypse amounted to enough to make a snowball, but it was pretty pathetic. North of us and south of us, they got slammed, but right here, no, not. Wow, 3 inches. That's awesome. I think if you piled all the snow up in our yard, it made about 3 inches. You have to pile it all up though. Spread out, it wasn't really, not really that much. Couple things. I want to, hold on a minute, let me share my screen here. Oh wait, I gotta do that first. I'm unprepared. Hold on a minute. Spent a lot of time getting ready for this class and still didn't really like, you ever had to give a talk in church or something like that? And they give you a topic and you research and you write and you think and you plan and whatever, and it just doesn't come together. Yeah, well, that's where I'm at with this class today, but hold on a minute. There we go. Okay. Cool. Share desktop 1. Share. I hate that it does that. Like, what is the function of that? That makes no sense whatsoever. Why would it do that? But it does. Here is the website for Dramatic Press, which is the publisher of our Halloween anthology. Which is this book right here. It's called Spooks, an anthology of Halloween tales. And if you read through the list of the contributors there, you may find a couple of people from our, oh, there's McKenna. Cool. From our group here. Calvin and Logan Hansen have a story in here, as well as Sabrina. I haven't seen Sabrina here on our list of people, which is weird. Sabrina's usually she would have had 43 things to say by now, which is cool. That is not a bad thing. I don't even want to say that like as if it was a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. I think it's great. She wrote a terrific story, actually. One of my very favorites in the book. She did a great job. So anyway, that is on sale now for those who might be interested in that. There's the link to it if you're interested in a purchase. Looks like we got them into, we did. Jensen's, you make your way in here. So I'm kind of proud of it. I think it's a cool, it's a cool book. It's a cool book. There's a lot of creepy stuff in it. There's a lot of there are fairy tale retellings. There are some seriously bloody horror stories. There are also some gentle, almost romantic stories. I will not tell you which kind mine are, but they are. It's a pretty cool mixed bag. It's a lot of fun to do. Just a crap load of work, but it was a lot of fun to do. And so there you go. If you're interested in that, support your local artists and some of your fellow students. That was actually one of the problems. He got up there and cried. Well, sometimes what are you gonna do? One of the problems was figuring out what to call this group here, because it's getting to the point where we got to call ourselves something. So for a long time, I had things like Mr. C's Academy for the Seriously Demented Intelligence, I tried a lot of different things, but that doesn't really like trip off the tongue when you make an acronym out of it. MCASDI doesn't really like, how do you even, that's the, like, what's his name in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs? It's the or something. I forget what it is. Anyway, you can't say it. Like, it's impossible.
Flinsnifer.
There you go. Thank you. I knew someone would know. I knew I could count on Josh. Yeah, so that was bad. So that's not going to work. And so finally, somebody's like, look, you got to put something on here, because the other two groups that provided authors for the book are South Valley Leadership Academy, which is SVLA, and then Ensign Peak Academy, which is EPA, which I always get confused with the Environmental Protection Agency, but that's because I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I'm weird. But I didn't have, like, I know there's like a Treasure Valley, I don't know, something or other, which is fine, but there are people here who are not a part of that, and who, anyway, so it's sort of like an ad hoc kind of a thing. So I finally came up with Mr. C's Underground Legion, which abbreviates to MCOOL. So I think that we're just going to go with that. So, you changed your name. Yes, some loser. You certainly did. And how proud you must be to have changed your name now to some loser. I still know who you are, though. Okay. So, MCOOL. Yeah, I like it. So that's what it is. This is now Mr. C's Underground Legion. In case anybody's curious.
I approve
About that. You approve. Cool. Sergeant Wolf.
Yes, that is perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
I think it works. I think it works. I'm going to stick with it. We'll see what happens over time, but I think we're going to stick with it. And one other thing. Remember how I write books? And remember how there's books that I don't write, that I totally didn't write? Because that's the way ghostwriting works. Looky. There are 3. Here's one. This one is 500 pages long. It came out at the end to be 500 pages. 79 possible paths through this Choose Your Own Adventure book here. It was a beast. This thing was so hard to write.
Is that a Tuttle Twins book?
Why, yes. Why, yes, it is. How clever of you. I don't, okay. Let's make this so that it's as obvious as possible. And since this is being recorded, let's be just a little careful, okay? All right? I don't write these Tuttle Twins books. These are children's books. I have written a children's book, but it's, how do I say this? In many ways, these lovely books, which I like very much, do not live up to my literary standards. Was that gentle enough? In some ways, I find the prose uninspiring. I love the books, and I'm really glad that, Connor's a genius. The guy's a genius. Putting these things together, and they're like the only thing in the market like it. And Connor's a total genius, don't get me wrong. He's just not a great fiction writer. It's not his thing. Which is why when the Tuttle Twins books needed to expand into the young adult arena, because let's face it, people, as much as you may love these books here, and I'm sure that I hope you do, because they're terrific. As much as you may love these books, let's face it, they're really not aimed at your age group. I mean, they're super cute and all. And I'm not saying that I don't still read Curious George, because come on. And Madeline. Oh, I love Madeline so much. And stuff. I'm not saying I don't love those, because I totally do. I'm not saying I'm not a Calvin and Hobbes fanatic, because I totally am. Although Calvin and Hobbes is actually written, that's not for children. Okay. You can read those, and every 10 years of your life, you'll get a whole new set of jokes. It's super fun. Anyway, these here, they're great, but at some point, you know, you start thinking, maybe I want something a little more robust. So here is the thickness of all of the Tuttle Twins books that have been published up until Monday. Here is just one. Well, here's the 3 that came out on Monday. These are for adults. And for older adults, I guess. Accessible for any level or age. You should want to read them, because they're terrific. One of the readers of this one specifically did a huge, like, wall-size map of all the different ways that you can get through this book. And it like filled up an entire wall of their house. It was the coolest thing ever. And wow, I'm sorry to hear that. No, Calvin, no, I don't think so. He's just 6. 6-year-old boys are like that. Anyway, but maybe he is spectrum, who knows. So apparently, if you read through this all the way through every possible path through this thing, apparently it's like 2,700 pages you would have to read, because there's so many different paths through the thing. That is not true of all of them. That's why I only wrote the one like this. The other 2 are not like that. But even so, even the short one is 300 pages. I mean, this one is actually my favorite, because I'm a baseball fan. So that was actually my favorite. Anyway. Hooray. So they went on sale on Monday, and they sold 3,000 copies in the first 48 hours, which is very cool, which means I may get to write more. But anyway, that's my random tour through books I totally did not write. There you go. Okay. Let's talk about war. Woohoo! Because that's kind of what we do. So we get to 1918. We have now been at war since when? Since 1914. When in 1914? You can do a little better than that. You're capable. You can do a little better than that. Give me closer than just 1914. August. Well done, McKenna. That's correct. Guns of August is a dead giveaway on when it started. Any tighter than that, you don't need to get. But August of 1914. So we've now been fighting for 3.5 years. And when we get to 1918, and at this point, pretty much everybody is convinced the war is going to go on forever. It's just never gonna end. July 28th. Thank you. Okay. Well, all right. Yeah. So the last 3 days of July, and then into August. So in August of 1914, the war begins. Let's just knowledge check here. What is the inciting event for the war? not to say the reason for the war, because that's too simplistic, as you all know. There's lots of reasons this war starts. But what is the inciting event?
Wasn't it the assassination of Franz Joseph?
Not Franz Joseph.
Franz someone.
It is Franz something.
Like Archduke Franz Ferdinand?
Ferdinand, that's correct. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was shot down. Well, let's see how good you are. Where?
Serbia?
I don't know where.
Good.
But I don't know who.
Very good on the Serbia. Where in Serbia?
His neck.
No. The capital. What is the capital of Serbia? Actually, I'm not sure. Is it the capital?
No.
Sarajevo. Sarajevo will notably host the Winter Olympics. And if you want some like serious creepy ruins, like how many of you are like love to look at pictures of ruins and stuff and or traipse through them or whatever? Yeah, I'm totally with you, Liam. So I love that stuff. If you want some really interesting, Belgrade is the current capital. That's correct. Sarajevo is not the capital, but it's not too far from Belgrade. Look at, Google will show you a bunch of these pictures of the Olympic venues, the Winter Olympic venues in Sarajevo, which have mostly now been completely abandoned. It's like looking at pictures of Chernobyl, which is also cool. Pictures of Chernobyl are freaky awesome. Love those things. I would love to go there. Are we having llama drama there in somebody's house? Or is it just not drama of the llama, just llama? Okay. I love llamas. Or maybe that's an alpaca. I can't ever tell. Okay, so that's very good. Okay, so now we have had for a long time not a whole lot of movement, but there are some. This happens a lot in war. Well, we should talk about that a little bit. So what happens over the course of the war, other than a bunch of people get shot? What's going on with like research and stuff? What are the scientists doing while this war is going on? Especially if they're cursed. Yes, cursed ruins are the best kind. You darn ruins! No, that's not.
Wouldn't they be trying to improve their weapons and ways of fighting?
Yes, they are.
Maybe medicine.
Also, there will be improvements in medicine. Absolutely. Good. What else?
Didn't they finally find that germs existed or something?
Yeah, this is about when we start nailing down germ theory, because you're losing a huge number of people. You have worldwide about 90 million people involved in this war. For purposes of understanding how many people that is, that's every man, woman, and child on the entire American Eastern Seaboard right now. It's also 90 million people is roughly the same number of people that there are west of the Mississippi to the Pacific Ocean in the United States. Everybody. So that's a lot of people, okay? Of those 90 million people, about half will end up wounded or killed. About 9 million people were killed, so about 10%. And another 22 million people are war casualties specifically. And then you have all the people who got sick, various things, or who starved. A lot of that going on late in the war, especially. Yeah, you have advances in guns, specifically the advance in the machine gun, the Maxim machine gun. There's two different ways to make an automatic weapon a rapid fire automatic weapon that we know of. The problem is barrel cooling, okay, because you're expelling flaming gas down the barrel of your gun, right? So the hotter it gets, the less accurate it will be, up to a certain point. And then, gas masks, absolutely. Lots of advances in gas and experimentation on what gas does to people. You could melt. It bends a little, gets soft. That's not that good. Now you can do it one of two ways. You can cool it with by rotating the barrels. That's how a Gatling gun works. Okay, you crank the thing, and it shoots out of different barrels. There are 8 or 9 barrels on it, and so none of them ever get super hot. Or you can cool it with injections of air or whatever, which is what the Maxim machine gun does. And the Maxim is the one that we end up with as being the dominant machine gun. At the beginning of the war, there weren't that many machine guns, probably a couple 100,000 machine guns on the battlefield. By the end of the war, everybody has machine guns. Automatic weapons are pretty normal, or at least semi-automatic weapons, rifles. You have major improvements in your accuracy and distance of your sniper rifles, as well as the rate of fire for machine guns, etc. You also have huge advances in artillery. Even, was it the last month? It was the last month of the war, I think. A guy named Harry Truman, who will become president of the United States in the 1960s. Harry Truman was an artillery officer in World War I in the American on the American divisions, and in the very last month of the war, they shipped him a new gun, brand new weapon that they had just developed that had 20% farther range. The maximum range of artillery up to that point for the Americans was about 9,000 meters. And this one had a range of 11,000 meters. At the very beginning of World War I, and this is one of my favorite stories, it's a little grisly, but at the very beginning of World War I, remember, Europe had been mostly at peace, generally speaking, at peace, for 20 or 30 years. There had been some developments in weaponry over that period of time. So at the very beginning of the war, when the German units start filtering into Belgium and occupying high ground, the French would ride out on their horses to look at them, and at what they thought was a safe range. The thing is that what they're using as a safe range was the safe range from the last war that they fought. That was no longer a safe range, and a bunch of them got picked off on the battlefield because all of a sudden there were guys on the other side who could shoot you a mile away. We're going to talk about Sergeant York a little bit later in class, but Sergeant York was an American soldier and was a mountain sniper, and he thought nothing of picking people off at 200 or 300 yards. Like, he thought that was child's play. Anyway, so these military advances, the Germans debut Big Bertha, which has a range of like 5 or 6 miles of artillery, and now you're way far from the battlefield, but you can't even see the enemy, but they can rain fire and death down on you. So this increases all the way to the end of the war, but you pretty much know by the middle of the war, this is how far the enemy can shoot, right? This is how far their artillery can reach. In the last week of the war, they're introducing new weapons that have an even greater range than the ones 20% farther. They can shoot you 2 kilometers farther away. So that starts to be a serious problem. Also, the war starts to lose cohesion the later on in the war that you get, as everybody is throwing all their troops, everything they've got at the enemy. So at the beginning of the war, describe to me like the average soldier. How old, average soldier, on the battlefield at the very beginning of the war
Now
would have been
we
like,
know. Now we know why they're called kilometers.
ha, 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 ha. It's not why, but that's hilarious. I'm going with that. From now on, that's how I'm going to explain it. Yeah, 20 to 30, the cream of the crop, right? Your healthiest, most physically fit soldiers. 20 to 30, they would have been people in good health. So these are people who were in college or early in their careers, fathers, young fathers. Statistically speaking, when do you have, in what decade of your life do you have the most children? You bear the most children. It's 20 to 30, right? You get some before that, especially back in the early part of the 20th century, much less now, but in the early part of the 20th century, not at all uncommon for 16, 17, 18-year-old kids to be having children. Earlier in the 1800s, not at all uncommon for 13, 14, 15-year-old girls to be having children. Not at all uncommon. We're about to celebrate Christmas. There's some dispute as to how old Mary was, but the answer is not real old. 14, 15 maybe, at the oldest. Not at all uncommon. As soon as you're capable of bearing children, essentially you're marriageable all the way up into the 20th century. But you're going to have most of your children between 20 and 30. For one thing, life expectancy doesn't go much beyond that until you get into the 20th century. So, life expectancy is going to be 45 or 50. So you got to have your children as early as possible. Otherwise what do you mean it's so wrong? It's a function of humankind. It's what humans do. All humans do it. If you're saying you wouldn't want to, well, I get that, but you're also a product of your time. There was a soccer game on Christmas Day, the first year of the war, 1914. They didn't do it again. Well, it's not. There's one sense that it's wrong. It's another sense that you lose a lot more women if they start having children at 13 and 14 years old. Your body's not really built for that yet. I mean, they're capable of it, but they're not really built for that. So if you wait until you're in your 20s, female bodies gather dramatically more strength and bone density and other useful things. So they don't die in childbirth nearly as much. Like in every fairy tale, when mom is gone, why is mom gone? Mom dies giving birth to somebody. Like that happens all the time, right? That does not happen nearly as much anymore. And part of the reason is that you're delaying having children. So, but between 20 and 30, if you take all of the men out of the population at 20 and 30, that starts to have serious societal repercussions. Who fills in for them at the factories? Who fills in for them in the farms? Who fills in for them everywhere? I did know that, but I always thought that was cool of the Spartans. There are many cool things about the Spartans. First we beat you at soccer, and then we beat the world. Yeah, that's the Germans, yeah. You did, and they were doing it then, too. They've always been good at it. I don't know why. So the women fill in. And sometimes kids, yes. You start having kids in the factories at 12 and 13 years old, because where are you going to get people? The first people you grab are not the children. The first, or the women even. The first people you grab are people like me. Too old to fight, got a rod of titanium in my leg. Never mind that you seriously do not want to come up against me in any kind of a physical combat. Never mind that. But you grab 40 and 50-year-olds, then 60-year-olds, then you grab teenagers, then the women start. Then you take all those guys out and you put uniforms on them and send them out to get shot. Then you grab women, and the women are the ones who go and start doing most of the manufacturing work, almost all of the farming work, etc. And this will have societal consequences that we're going to talk about a lot more when we get to January. But some of the societal consequences are that women got into the factories and the counting houses and the shops and decided that they really liked it. And not only that, they were really good at it. They were better than most of the men. So when the men came home and are like, okay, I want my job back, the women are like, about that. See, the deal is, I'm better at this than you are. So why don't you go home and sweep and cook me dinner, and I'll be home when I'm done riveting and welding. Okay? Okay. This will cause major societal upheaval in the 1920s. Yes, it will. And farther on, we're still feeling the effects of some of this. But I don't want to talk about that right now. Okay, so a lot of the scientific work is being done by people of both genders now. And we're having rapid advances. The advances in aircraft are crazy. I showed you some of those pictures last time, right? That website that has all of those. Lots of knives. Wow. Did that go dark, or is that just me? But I want to point this out. Okay, the advances in aircraft are crazy. By the end of the war, you have serious military impact from these aircraft. You have bombing runs in one particular battle as the Turks are trying to retreat ahead of British advances out of the Holy Land. They're going through these kind of narrow sort of canyon type things, really steep sided walls, really narrow canyons, and they're being butchered by aircraft. You can't get in there. It's almost impossible to get an army in there, even by marching. You certainly can't get tanks in there or any of that. But you can fly in. And so in one engagement, they killed a couple thousand Turks who were trying to retreat up this narrow valley. They dropped half a ton of bombs on these guys and strafed them with machine gun fire until they ran out of bullets. There was no place for them to go. So you were starting to be able to rain fire and death on people from the skies by then. I want to point it out. This is a really cool book called Birdmen about the very first aviators. But look at this plane. That plane is only 10 years before the end of the war. It's from 1908, if I remember correctly. Okay? So that's what they were flying a decade before the war. And at the end of the war, they have these monoplane strafing bombing machines that can just rain fire and brimstone on you from the sky. Okay? So you get a ton of that kind of thing. You also have huge advances in transportation. Cars become significantly more efficient and much more, what's the word I'm looking for here? Much more reliable and fun to drive over the course of World War I. So before the war, 1910 to 1915 in the United States, the odds of the average person having a car was about 1 in 10 to 1 in 20, somewhere in that neighborhood. By 1920, it was 1 in 3, and by 1930, it was about 3 in 4. Huge advances in automobile technology. Tanks get invented. We didn't even have those. Huge advances in submarine warfare. Surface shipping doesn't really get a whole lot better. Like, there's only so much you can do with that. The surface ships we have now look pretty much the same as surface ships in 1920. Like, it's just not, there's only so much you can do, right? You have to build a big floating bathtub. That's what you got to do because that's how it works, right? And so, and Anyway, it's huge advances in technology, killing power, all kinds of stuff, to the point that it starts to have an impact on the battlefield in ways that were really unpredictable. 1914, 15, 16, 17, there's not a lot of movement. In fact, here's how I want to illustrate this. We did a little bit of this when I was up there before, but I want to actually show you the whole thing here. So this is a very cool video. I may have shared this with you before. Some of you will have seen it, but it's a very cool video that I found that shows, this is about 6 minutes long, but this is a map of Europe that goes through every day of the war from the beginning to the end and shows you what happened, the battle lines for that day. So it's a sort of a time-lapse snapshot of the war. It's a really, to me anyway, I've always thought this is one of the most interesting maps to look at, one of the most fun. So I want to play this for you. There's music, but the music's kind of irrelevant, so don't worry about that. Just look at what happens to the map. And especially pay attention, well, I'll stop it when we get there, but especially pay attention to what happens after the middle of 1917, because the map dramatically changes starting about then. You see how the red starts to grow here? Middle Eastern Middle Earth. That is the coolest thing I ever heard. This is a map of Europe. Now the red, of course, is Germany. But look at the encroaching blue down here. It pushes in and pushes back. So here we are in 1914. A month is going by here. Is there any significant movement? The map doesn't really change. We're in 1915. Any movement in the map?
At the bottom, it looks like they're coming up from maybe Africa and
Right.
blue
Over here
in
you
from
have
the top.
Africa, Asia, some other stuff, and there is some movement here. Look at Europe. This might as well be a still picture. There's nothing happening. Whoops. We're now up to May 1915. So the war's been going on for almost a year, and for the last more or less year, there hasn't been a whole lot of movement in Europe, at least. There's going to be some in 1915, especially on the Russian front as the Russian army starts to collapse. Okay, the war's now 1 year old.
Now it looks like all the fighting came back to Europe.
Most of the fighting is now back in Europe, and you are getting some movement down here in the south, down toward Greece. But over here in France, we've now spent 18 months in France. 750,000 men have died, and we have not had movement of more than a mile in any part of the front for 18 months. You are getting some movement out here in Russia as Russia's armies start to collapse. There'll be more of that coming up here, but not too much more. Down here toward Greece, there was some movement down toward Greece as Bulgaria fell and as the Austrians finally subdued. It took a year and a half to subdue the Serbians and the Croatians. But at that point, the British joined the war down here, in an attempt to stop the Turks and the Austrians from taking over strategically vital pieces of the Greek peninsula and the Adriatic coast, where some of us will be in 108 days or something. But the Germans are still pushing down, chewing through Bulgaria and Albania down toward the Greek frontier. The Greeks are still technically neutral. That won't last. And it might as well be a still picture all the way through the early parts of 1916. We just spent a year, lost another 3 million men killed for a gain of a few miles in Russia and not 1,000 yards in France. Down in Greece, this northern part of Greece is called Macedonia. This is where Alexander the Great is from. That piece right there just jumped blue because the British are having to fortify this to prevent German encroachment into this area. The Russians have stopped the Greeks. Well, really, Mother Nature has stopped the Germans in their advance into Russia. And now, again, nothing is happening in France. We're now in January of 1917, and the Americans will be getting into the war here fairly shortly.
Mother Nature helping the neglected child.
Yeah. And months and months and months and months and months and months.
But it is hard for Americans to realize the magnitude of the war.
A whole year has gone by and the map hasn't changed really at all. 4 more million men died. Greece goes entirely blue. The Bolshevik Revolution starts and Russia starts losing its territory on its front. '1917 is, if you're looking for a lot of movement, not great. Yeah, woe is because Russia all of a sudden decides they're not too excited about this war, and the Bolshevik Revolution gets rid of the Tsar, yes, including Anastasia. But note now over here on the right, this is now all blue. Germany's ability to project its power outside of Central Europe is being substantially reduced. They've consumed so many men, so much war material, food, all those kinds of things, that they no longer have the ability to project their power outside of Central Europe. They're having to concentrate most of their fire in this Central European area. Watch down here in the Holy Land, we now have a chunk of blue where we have not had that. This is the revolution spawned by Lawrence of Arabia, etc. Yes, Abby?
I also noticed that Portugal has turned blue too.
Yes, Portugal has entered the war. Oh, by the way, over the course of 1918, some other countries will get into the war, like Costa Rica and Venezuela. And by get into the war, what I mean is sign a piece of paper that says they're at war with Germany. Look, when Costa Rica enters the war, they have 600 troops. That's their total army. is 600 people and 2 ships, both of which sort of double as like mail carrier ships. They did have guns, apparently like at least 1 each. Costa Rica will not, as you might imagine, send any significant number of people to the fighting. But if you declare war on Germany, then if Germany has any money in your banks, you can take it. Yes, the Aussies have now finished, except for this little tiny patch of Papua New Guinea down here, the Aussies have finished exterminating the German presence in the South Pacific, and they will be sending significant troops, especially in this area right here in the Black Sea, but also here in France. You'll start to have Australian troops playing significant roles in Europe. But pay attention to the Holy Land here at the end of 1917, early part of 1918. Ukraine goes neutral. This is Ukraine here. Ukraine declares neutrality, signs peace, and stops fighting. This is seen widely at the beginning of 1918 as a prelude to German success in the war. If they didn't have to fight both fronts, hey, maybe they would be able to take over the whole thing. So Germany takes it over. And look at the huge gains in Germany here. Germany is now pushing into basically anarchic parts of Russia. They've occupied the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, all of Belarusia, most of Ukraine, and Germany is having huge success all along the Russian front because, look, the Russians don't really have an army now. The Russian army revolted against the Tsar, took over the government, and now you basically have a Russian civil war going on. And while you have a civil war happening, it's really hard to fight the Germans. Note, nothing is happening at all in France still. It's not that there's no fighting going on here. Oh, no, 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 no. The most bloody fighting in the war is going on right here. Just no territories. Nothing's happening. German encroachment into Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Really just Norway, or really just Finland. But look at the German expanse. They've taken over almost all of the Black Sea area. Now you look at this map, okay? Take a close look at this map here. We are now in the middle of 1918. If I were to just show you this map, and all you had seen was, let's say you'd seen the last 6 months of the war, okay? Just run it back to the early part of 1918, and we run this forward. Which side do you think is going to win? Central powers or the Allied powers? The red or the blue? Right. I mean, how could you look at that map and think otherwise? Germany has just conquered over the last 6 months about half as much territory as it had to start with. Look at this. You have German armies in Armenia. Look at them push all the way into here, into the stands. This is the Caspian Sea over here, which is my favorite body of water in the world. Just because it's called the Caspian Sea, because it's awesome. I actually have never been there. Down here, you do have some encroachment. The Holy Land is now in possession of British troops and Arab troops under the command of T.E. Lawrence, also known as Lawrence of Arabia. So, and you've also had some movement in Europe. Let me back up just a little here. Germany has been having some success in France as well. It's easy to get distracted by all the movement going on in Europe or in Eastern Europe. But watch over here what happens from February to June in 1918. Where you've had no movement in France at all for years. All of a sudden, Russia starts pushing the French armies back, starts pushing the British armies back. Now we're in July. Germany is still picking up territory over here in Asia. It's August, 4 years into the war, but now that's the turning point. Fall of 1918 is the turning point. At this point, Germany occupies most of the map, well, more than half of the map. They've made significant incursions into France, pushing toward Paris is like right here. So they're getting to the gates of Paris. They own everything in Eastern Europe from this line over, and most of Russia, all of Ukraine. They've almost surrounded the Black Sea. They own the Bosporus and the Dardanelles, all the oil fields in Romania, although this is Romania over here now, and losing Romania is a major problem. That's the high water mark. You would not, looking at that map, say, wow, Germany is about to completely lose it. And yet, watch what happens here above Greece. Watch what happens down here in the Holy Land. Germany's made a major offensive, pushed all the way out. They look like they're conquerors of the whole world. And then, you ever played, most of you played Risk, right? Risk? Yes. Do you ever have that one turn where you get a whole bunch of extra armies because you cash in a couple of sets of cards and you just picked up a continent and you get this huge number of armies and you pour them onto the board, and for one turn you carry all before you, like you take over like half the globe in one turn? And then what happens the next turn? When it's the other guy's turn to hit back. And you've got one army in Kamchatka and one army in the Urals and one army, you implode. And that's exactly what happens to Germany. The Turks bail out on them and they lose almost all of this. Huge neutrality. Okay? And then in the space of, let's go back here. September 1918. The war is going to end in 2 months. End in 2 months. Would anybody look at this map and say, wow, Germany's in deep trouble? I wouldn't. And yet they will sue for peace less than 60 days after this. Watch this happen. Boom, boom, boom. They lose Bulgaria. They're losing, the Turks are getting chewed up down here. So Austria, this is where all the Austrian troops are, is down here. Austria can't continue to fight. We're now 1 month. We're only 1 month away from the end of the war. Starting to lose ground in France. This is mostly due to huge divisions of tanks come pouring into Europe, many of them driven by Americans. The blue is now pushing up to the banks of the Danube's up here. Comes down like this. Now pushing up to the banks of the Danube. 23rd of October. We're only 2 weeks away from the end of the war. There goes the Ottoman Empire. There goes Austria. First part of November. And that's it. Sabrina is trying to get in. How can Sabrina not get in? Let me see if I can email her. Oh, I'll bet she is in the waiting room and can't get in because I'm playing this thing here. Hold on a minute. Yep. My fault, Sabrina B. Jones. I'm sorry. I didn't see you there. Yes, quiet one. Are you raising your hand?
I was, but they already answered it.
Oh, okay. This is the part that I think is really interesting. All of a sudden, really over the course of about a month, Germany just implodes. They lose their navy. The navy revolts, will not follow orders to go to sea. They raise the communist flag. Germany is being invaded by communism. The Tsar won't quit, but the troops won't fight. They've pushed back almost entirely out of France. But please note, this map, all of this brown territory here, this is where Germany was, where German troops were at the end of World War I. Are there any blue areas that belonged to Germany before the war started? Not really. A little bit down here. Those belong to Austria-Hungary. This is Serbia, Croatia, Albania, Bulgaria. Those were nominally under the control of the Austrians. But how about Germany? Here's Germany. This line right here. Here's Germany. Any blue in there? No. No German territory is occupied by the Allies. There is a little bit of Austrian territory that's occupied by the Allies. Are the Russians occupying any German territory? On the contrary, Germany occupies hundreds of thousands of square miles of Russian territory. So Germany ends the war legitimately still believing, a lot of Germany, that this was at worst a stalemate. At the end of the war, the Allies didn't occupy any German territory, and the Germans still occupied good chunks of enemy territory. And yet, frankly, I thought it was a super great video. I'm really impressed, the amount of scholarship that goes into something like that. But Germany was exhausted. They didn't have any ability to project their power anymore. I did want to show you this, as long as I'm sharing the screen. I'm going to stop doing that here in a second. But I wanted to show you this painting. This is a painting done by a guy named Josh Singer Sargent, right at the end of the war. Sabrina, I even showed everybody a copy of your book. I'm glad you remembered. I did wonder where you were. It's a painting by Josh Singer Sargent called Gassed, which there's a lot of this kind of stuff, this part of the war. By the way, I mean, you can't really see this. They're blindfolded because they were gassed. And the gas, I've scrolled way in on the thing now. Let's, you can take a look at some of the brushwork here. But one of the things I wanted to show you is what's going on in the background here. And that's the extreme edge of the painting. See that? I mean, not the little hair that got onto the painting while he was painting it, but
Playing ball in the background.
yep. Yes, they are. What do you think that would mean? Why would he put that in the background of this painting?
Was it to show how ignorant people were?
Could be, yeah. What was really going on? This is probably phosgene gas or possibly phosphorus. Phosphorus burns so bright that it will burn your eyes, even if you don't get any on you. So you'd use phosphorus bombs to blind the enemy and then make a charge. Yeah, it's been going on for so long now that people get to the point where they just kind of continue their regular lives and don't pay that much attention to it. How long have we been at war in the Middle East? I love that theory. That's awesome because the Scots are amazing. How long have we been at war in the Middle East? Since before any of you were born. That's how long. And it just kind of on it goes. You know, we don't really think too much about it because you don't really think too much about it. It's unlikely that you will not be required to go. If you don't join the military voluntarily, you will not be required to go. But it has been going on. People get killed every day. The war's been going on a really long time. The rest of us sort of live our lives because it doesn't directly impinge upon us. Evan.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy to think about somewhere in the faraway land that never concerns us. We don't know where it is. People are fighting, but it doesn't concern us because we're not there. And to us, it's almost imaginary that people are actually fighting for us every day and dying.
Yeah, well, I wonder about for us. I'm not sure how many of us really. You're 100% right. I mean, you're 100% right. There are soldiers on the line every day. For the most part, those soldiers are protecting other people. They're not really protecting us very much. Again, this is one of those things where I kind of wonder about it a little bit. I try to think about parallels, right? Because I don't want to just learning history is great. I mean, that's fine. To be able to spout statistics and stuff at people is really cool. It makes you very popular at parties. No, it does not make you popular at parties. Please do not do this. This will get you uninvited to parties.
I can't spout statistics, but I can spout random facts.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Also, a little of that goes a long way. So be, just a little careful about that. But it's being able to relate it to me, like that's what Morgan does. Awesome. That's one of the reasons I like Morgan so much. We're like kindred spirits. We like do that kind of thing. Anyway, so but the deal is, we kind of put it out of our mind a little bit, kind of, it doesn't really concern us all that much because it's just it's been going on for so long. When the armistice was signed, both sides had lengthy plans for battle for 1919 and 1920 and on and on. Like the war was just going to keep going on forever because it didn't really, have much impact. And yet there are people who are being wounded and killed every day. And what happens when we lose that perspective? I keep trying to think, okay, so now that I know this, that's fine. But what does it mean to me? What is my obligation with I understand this? Like, okay, I know this now. How does this change things for me? What am I going to do today that I wasn't going to do yesterday because I learned this thing? That's when the historical knowledge starts to matter. And I think for me, looking at the modern war, I look at Germany. I mean, remember that map there? If you lived in the center of Germany, granted, you almost certainly had lost friends, relatives, whatever, who had been killed in the war. So it's a different kind of situation. We'll do between the wars for a month, a couple times, and then we'll move on to World War II. First of all, to appreciate the fact that I don't have to go and fight. I think that's valuable. But second, not to take for granted the fact that there are people who do, and to think about why they're doing that. The Germans basically didn't have a lot of bombs fall in their territory during World War I. The war happened somewhere else. They didn't really have to pay. I mean, you had to pay attention to it, obviously, because they were working and starving. And by the end of the war, the naval blockade had reduced their food supplies to the point that their Germans were starving, dying of Spanish flu, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was horrible for the civilians as well. But because it wasn't happening in Germany, I wonder if the war didn't really come home to them in a way. And I think about whether that's true for me too, if it's out of sight, out of mind, you know, because it's not happening to me.
My World War I letter that I wrote.
Okay.
My World War I letter that I wrote made me realize like a lot more of what was going on because I researched like the Battle of Somme. I'm not sure.
Cool. That was what I was hoping would happen when you wrote that. And thinking about why. I mean, what is the function of having? If I'm going to send somebody over, and I'm paying taxes for it, right? If I'm sending somebody someplace to die for me, isn't it my obligation to make sure that I know why that's happening? And to be really sure that that's what I actually want to have happen? Isn't it a disrespect to them not to do that? And yet you hit the end of the war, you've got American troop transports on their way to Europe who find out about the armistice, and they were universally disappointed that they didn't get a chance to fight. Right. Would I be willing? Would if I had to go, would I be, and they won't let me, too old, too broken down, too awesome, and you're too young. They won't let you go. But if you wouldn't be willing to go, if the war doesn't make enough sense for you to go, how could you send someone else to do it for you? That doesn't seem honorable to me. See what I'm saying? So I have to think about that. And I think about that a lot. And I'm not 100% sure that I'm clear enough on what we're doing in the various military engagements that we're doing in the world right now. I'm not sure that I'm clear enough on what we're doing there and why we're doing it, that I would be willing to volunteer to go. And that makes me wonder if I should be sending somebody else, even if they volunteer, which we have an all-volunteer army. It still makes me wonder. It makes me think about it and try to pay a little more attention to what is happening in the world, even if I don't have to do it myself. If I'm asking somebody else to do it, is that something that I want to do? So we reach armistice. There's a bunch of fun stuff that I wanted to talk to you about before we actually do armistice. You have battlefield graveyards all over Europe, right? But in almost every battlefield of the war, you have a set, like an unknown soldier type thing, right? For all the bodies that they found that they can't identify. But I want to see if I can like quantify for you how many of those there are.
Well, I
Go
actually
ahead.
lived in Europe for 7 years, and I went to a lot of those memorial sites, and there was like almost half of them or more where it said like only to God this person is known. And then there was also like a huge list of people where they couldn't find their bodies.
That's
So
the other part of it. Yeah. So 500,000 or so bodies or bodies were found where they don't really know. They've been demolished beyond the ability of anybody to identify them. 500,000 maybe. There's another 500,000 who just went missing. They just disappeared. We don't know what happened with them. Dog tags were not a thing until World War II. And that's one of the reasons is that people carried dog tags, metal tags around their neck so that their bodies they could be identified. But you have, there's a really, we're going to maybe see this scene, I don't know, in a movie called Saving Private Ryan, where they have a giant bucket full of dog tags. No bodies, just dog tags. And they go through them like cards. You would have papers with your names on them or whatever. Paper could get wet, it gets ripped, it gets smudged, it gets burned. I mean, it's impossible. So you have as many as 1 million men who just vanish. We don't know what happened to them. War is messy that way. There is, do you guys remember the story? You would have read it in War to End All Wars about the Lost Battalion, the American battalion that got pinned down in Dance Like the Wind. So for those of you who have your book, the Lost Battalion is on, let's see. Oh, here it is. Starts on page, what page is that? 139. The one that has tanks on it, page 139, if you have the book. I wonder if I could ask somebody to read starting early in the battle. This is in the Battle of the Argonne Forest, which is in late September in 1918. About 130, page 139. Yeah, 139. Somebody read that for me? Hey, McKenna. Wow, there's some serious fun going on at the Jensen household here.
Do you want me to read it?
You know what? You need to be punished because you didn't get here for an hour. So yes. It's not really a punishment for you to read stuff because you love doing it. But
Okay.
that's okay. Go right ahead.
So you said start at page 139?
139 where it says early in the battle.
Okay. Early in the battle, Major Charles Whittlesey of the U.S. 77th Division and more than 500 men trapped in a ravine behind enemy lines were surrounded by a much larger force of Germans. For 2 days, the Americans fought off the enemy troops. On the second day, their food ran out. Then they were hit by an American artillery barrage intended for the Germans. Private Omer Richards had carried into battle a cage holding 8 carrier pigeons, Burns trained to carry messages between specific locations. I want one of those. Several birds dispatched with messages asking for help had been shot down. But now there was just one bird left, a favorite named Cher Ami, French for dear friend. Richards clicked a message to the pigeon's left leg, giving the Americans location. We are along the road parallel to map reference 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it. Cher Ami threw a blizzard of enemy bullets and exploding shells. The bird reached his loft 25 miles to the rear just 25 minutes later. He had been shot through the breast and blinded in one eye, but he had delivered the message clipped to his leg, which had also been hit by a bullet and was dangling by a tendon. The shelling was immediately halted. Nothing else was heard from the beleaguered Americans who had become known to the world as the Lost Battalion. In an effort to rescue them, 2 divisions moved out toward the German lines, and as they approached, the Germans withdrew. On October 7th, after a 5-day siege, the 194 survivors of the Lost Battalion's 554 men climbed out of their ravine and marched back to the American lines. Cher Ami lost his shattered leg, but army medics carved a small wooden leg for him. The French awarded the doughty little pigeon their Croix de Guerre medal for bravery under fire, and he was sent to the United States to become an army mascot.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the story of the Lost Battalion, right? Now, the reason we know this is because the pigeon, the carrier pigeon, actually made it. You can make an argument that the carrier pigeon was one of the bravest soldiers in the entire war. It's one of my favorite stories. I love this story, right? If you put this in a novel, everybody would be like, oh, come on. That can't actually happen, except that it did, right? His leg was hanging by a tendon. Yeah, that's, yeah. But he got through, right? But if he doesn't get through, if Cher Ami does not make it through, then we never find out what happened. The Americans will shell that position forever. And I mean, they were without food for 3 days when they were relieved. Any longer, and they almost certainly they would have all been dead. And they would have just been completely lost. They would have just vanished. Happens. This is the kind of thing that can happen. I also thought it was worthwhile. This is on the next page where you have talking about America's black divisions. Strict segregation. You did not have mixed combat units in World War I. The American unit that spent longer in combat than any other happened to be a black unit, the 369th. The Harlem Hellfighters of the 369th spent longer in combat than any other American unit. The Battalion of History class. I love it. The Underground Legion. Wale, my sisters and brothers. I'm looking at I look at these pictures, like the one on page 142 here with the picture of the forest here, and think, you know, I've been in a French forest and it is a beautiful, pastoral, serene place. Oh yeah, Sabrina does not know what the Underground Legion is. We decided that that's what we're going to call Mr. C's Underground Legion is what we're going to call this group here. So I just look at that and I look at those shattered and blasted trees. It reminds me of the Rape of the Shire, for those of you who are into Middle Earth, Adrian. Reminds me of the Rape of the Shire from Middle Earth. Just the destruction that happened. There are lots of interesting stories about various kinds of surrenders as Germany started to collapse. I don't know whether it was in this book or in another one that I read about a guy who was assaulting a German position, and they had an underground bunker there, and he attacked it he didn't know how many guys. There were just a couple of guys there. And so he shot at them with his pistol and told them to surrender. And so they threw up their hands and started surrendering. He yelled into the bunker in German, "Okay, everybody come out and surrender." And like an entire battalion of German soldiers came out and surrendered to him. And then he realized that his gun did not have any more bullets in it. He only had 2 shots left in his gun, and he fired them both, and he missed. And so they all surrendered to him as he guarded them with his empty pistol all the way to the American lines. That's another one of my total favorites. But there are other stories like that. I think we have the story of Sergeant York in here. I don't know whether York was in here or not. There's a great American World War I hero named Sergeant York.
Have you guys seen the movie? It's so great.
I have not seen that movie. Oh, wait. Maybe
I think it's Gary Cooper, I think.
Yeah. So he's tell us a little bit about it. I remember the film. It's been a long time, but
It's been a long time for me too, but I think this guy, at first, I think he was like a drunk or something, then he kind of got a hold of his life, then he was drafted, but he really was bothered by the concept of killing other people, so he really had to work to get over that. But then he was like the most amazing shot in like the whole county, and so he either single-handedly or something like picked off like an entire something, like he picked his way.
Single-handedly, yes. Let me see if I can find it in this book. He was just a hick, just a dude from, he wasn't Idaho, but might as well have been. And he found himself in combat against an entire a huge, well, not a huge, but a German armored unit, and basically captured the entire thing by himself.
I think he did that by getting up to the hill and then picking off the machine gunners, and then he just totally wiped it out with them.
There'll be more of these in World War II when we get to there. Harry S. Truman. Hold on a minute. Let me look in my index here and see if I can find it, because I really want to read this story. And we've talked a lot about, we'll talk about it a little bit more here in just a second, about Corporal Alvin C. York, 475. Oh, I had passed it, so I was never going to get there. Okay. Okay. This is October 8, so 1 month before the end of the war. At Châtel-Chéry in the Argonne, an American soldier who had earlier been a conscientious objector on religious grounds, Corporal Alvin C. York, was in action. His patrol having been surrounded and outnumbered 10-1, York, single-handed, killed as many as 28 German soldiers and captured 132 others, bringing back 35 machine guns. Asked by a divisional general how many Germans he thought he had killed, York replied, "General, I would hate to think I missed any of those shots. They were all pretty close range, 50 or 60 yards. Commenting at his fellow soldiers' shooting abilities, he remarked, "They missed everything but the sky." He, however, was a mountaineer. "It weren't no trouble nohow for me to hit them big army targets," he explained. "They were so much bigger than turkeys' heads." So he's just a backwoods mountaineer guy. And actually, dragons. I have a series for you. I think it's called His Majesty's Dragons, which is essentially a retelling of the Napoleonic Wars, only both sides have dragons. it's pretty great. It's pretty great. You can't kill someone in a cartoon. Very few cartoons have dead people. You can't kill people when you're ghostwriting either. Well, you can't kill the main characters. I'm not saying you can't kill anybody, but I'm not saying you can either. You just have to read the books to find out. Okay. So we have reached, and there's 1,000 more stories like this. When they start liberating these towns at the end of the war, they're liberating some of these towns that have been occupied by Germans for 4 years. They have no news. They have no idea what. They have no idea what's been going on in the war. In one town, deep behind the German lines, a little French town, there was an Irish woman who had gone to France to study French right before the war started, got trapped in the town, and didn't hear another word about what was going on for 4 years. When the American troops marched in and liberated the town, everybody was, they were really confused because none of them had heard that that Americans were in the war. They had no idea. So you get fun stories like that. You have this idea and you look on a map and there's what?
Oh, Mr. C, is All the Lights We Can't See, I got that book. Is that about World War I or World War II?
Oh, what a book. Oh my gosh. There are so many of those. So many of those. You get the idea when you look at a map that there's these bright lines on the map, right? Here are the Germans and here are the French and etc. But on the ground, it doesn't look like that. Nobody knows. They talk about the Argonne Forest and the fighting in the Argonne Forest, and like it's just small groups of troops scattered throughout the forest, and nobody knows where. There's no lines or anything. You just keep your buddies together and try to kill anybody who tries to kill you. There's that part of I think it's Avengers Civil War. Maybe it's not Civil War. No, it's Winter Soldier, where Cap and the Falcon are assaulting one of the helicarriers or whatever. The Falcon says, "How do I know who the bad guys are?" And he says, "Anybody that's shooting at you is a bad guy." And that's really, seriously, that's how war works. Like in that forest, it's dark, it's raining, everybody's wearing gray and green and, blending into the forest and whatever. How do you know who the bad guys are? Well, whoever's shooting at you is a bad guy. Except that sometimes it's not. Like, remember the Lost Battalion? They're being shelled by their own troops. They have no idea that those guys are even out there. And it happened over and over and over all the time. You have no idea. It's chaotic. It's insane. You finish the war and everybody is excited, and we have, well, not everybody, but a lot of people are excited. Contrary to what you may believe and what is generally shown us in movies and television shows and stuff, the war was actually fairly popular at the end of it. Even in places like Britain. Britain's another place where no bombs fell on Britain because the German Zeppelins did drop some bombs on London, but less than 500 people on the island of Britain died during the war. So the war was actually fairly popular. The generals who fought in the war were lauded as heroes, and even a decade or so later, when General Haig, the German general, or the British General Haig died, hundreds of thousands of people filed by his coffin while it lay in state, and his funeral was hugely attended. So it's not as simple as saying what a horrible waste and the whole thing was terrible. Yeah, but there are still great things that come out of it, and there are lessons that we can learn from these things. One is never get involved in a land war in Asia. And also think about it. We end the war, and then what? What was it all for? What did it achieve? More or less nothing. And more than one person at the end of the war, looking at the peace treaty, will say, we're just going to have to do this all again in 20 years. And they were right. Almost to the day, 20 years later, you'll get the beginning of World War II. But we have to bring the troops home. We have to get through the Roaring '20s. America has now established itself as the world's largest military power and the most powerful economy on the planet. We have to get through the rise of jazz, Prohibition, the Great Depression, the revolt in Germany against communism, which installs a dude named Adolf Schicklgruber as the Chancellor of Germany. Oh, he goes by a different name by then. Sorry, he was born Anton Schicklgruber. He gets another name later. By the way, this Schicklgruber guy was involved in World War I and was actually temporarily blinded in a gas attack in Belgium. Schicklgruber is a cool name, right? We can stop arguing about narwhals and various amphibious reptiles, or just amphibians. You can't have an amphibious reptile, never mind. We have to do the peace. We got to look at the map of Europe after the war and the treaty that changed the map of Europe. And if you think that's just lines drawn on a map, when I arrived in the People's Republic of Hungary in 1987, I met a large number of people still complaining about the treaty that ended World War I. A large number of people. Who were still complaining about a treaty that was signed 70 years before that, which none of them personally could really, well, one of them, but most of them could not personally remember. They were still really, really offended by this treaty. 70 years later. They complained about it to me a lot. No, not just, but this is a point, not just Hungarians, okay? Austrians were this way, Germans are this way, the French are this way, the British are this way, the Russians are this way, the Ukrainians are this way. They're all this way. They don't forget. They don't forget. If at the end of the Civil War, you had big chunks of Southern territory annexed into New York, or forcibly divided up and occupied by people from Ohio, believe me, they would still be complaining about it. Believe me. So all I'm saying is, you may think, and it's easy to think, this is just, stuff that happened 70 years ago. No, it has complications today. Today. If you go to Eastern Europe, anywhere in Europe really, but mostly Eastern Europe, you go to Eastern Europe, you can start an argument in a bar today about World War I. It's 100 years ago. The war ended more than 100 years ago. But you can still start a bar fight by talking to people about World War I and blaming it all on one side or the other. Believe me.
Why can't they just forget it?
Horrible experiences like that, it's pretty tough. I would think that having access to the atonement of Jesus Christ would allow you to forgive and forget, since Christ specifically argued that you had to do that. That was.
So when your entire family has been passing down stories of the war for generations now, it is pretty hard to forget it.
Yeah. And really, let's face it, okay? It's like complaining is like a family tradition for a lot of families. Yeah, and I think it's understandable that you would be angry about it. I mean, you still have to get over it, I think, because it's non-productive to lug that around with you everywhere. But I do understand people that do that. I do. I understand why they are the way they are. And World War II even more, as we will get into. We'll talk next time about the treaty itself specifically, but you should remember Armistice Day. This is really easy, okay? Armistice Day is the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. Yes, please. Yeah, let's see. So what day is that? What day? Armistice Day is the day, technically, is the day the guns fall silent, the day the war ends. So what day would that be? 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. I know that sounds like it's like out of the book of
November 11th.
That is November 11th. Okay, not 9/11, 11/11. I don't know what it is with the 11 thing, but apparently that's like a big deal. Let's see, where are you? Oh, you're up here. Let's see if I can give you unlimited cosmic powers. Oh, I didn't notice that until just now. Not only can you change your name, I can change your name. That is a power I have not been making sufficient use of during this class.
Wow.
I am going to repent and do more with that. I'm making you host. Smeagol, you have become the host. What would I change yours to? Probably Deagle. No, that's just a little Lord of the Rings joke there. Little Tolkien fandom joke. FYI. So you should be able to share your screen then, I think. I can still share mine, so I don't know. But you should be able to. It should be a bar down at the bottom where you can. I might Elrond now. No. I feel a lot like Theoden. I feel a lot like Theoden.
My letter that I wrote from World War I has none of the word "the" in it.
On purpose?
Yeah.
Cool. I admire that. This is a meme that Elizabeth came up with. She sent it to me yesterday, and I told her to share it with everybody today. This is a World War II meme, but that's okay, because we're getting started with that here, almost. We'll talk about the schedule here in a second. Whoops. We had it for a second. There it is. And then it disappeared again. That's weird. So while she's pulling that up, let's talk schedule. Let's see. I have to look and see when. So this is our last class before Christmas. I will be there on the 10th of January, so just about a month. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I liked that one. There are lots of these. We will share a whole bunch of World War II memes and stuff. I will be there on the 10th. We will at least a chunk of the time be watching a movie. I want to there's two movies that I really, really, really want us to see. One of them is called War Horse. Some of you will have seen that movie.
I've
Max
listened
was like, dude, yeah.
So great.
War Horse is fabulous. But
And
the
it's
other
so
one is
sad.
yes, well, it's a war movie. The other one is called what is the name of it? Hang on a second.
You should do Unbroken.
There are 1,000 World War II movies, and we will never.
I agree with
be able to-
Unbroken.
we will never be able to pick one of
I've
them.
read the book, but I haven't seen the movie. My brother says we could also watch Sergeant York with Gary Cooper.
Right. Yeah, Sergeant York is a possibility. But there's a movie that I really want us to watch called They Shall Not Grow Old. A few
There's a movie about the U-boat. It's U-571, I think.
yes, there's a ton of war movies. And a lot of them are pretty good, especially the more recent ones. They're pretty good, but they cannot grow, or They Shall Not Grow Old. The reason that I want that one is because Peter Jackson took his mountain of gold that he got paid for making 31 movies about the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, and used a bunch of it to take a bunch of World War I footage and colorize it and slow it down so that it looks and add sound to it, so that it looks and feels much more alive. When the film was released, it was rated R for basically for pictures of dead bodies, pictures of war wounds, pictures of dead bodies, that kind of thing. It is possible that I will not be able to get permission from your parents to show you this movie, but I really want to, because it, in a way that I've never seen in any other, in a couple minutes, Phantom 027, Ultimate Judge, ends in a couple minutes. I want this experience to be as real as possible, and I've never seen any film that made the war come alive in a way that this film does. It's an amazing achievement, and I really want to do that if we can show that one. If not, it'll be War Horse or one of those. There will be much popcorn, of course, because you can't really watch a movie if you don't have popcorn. If I do a class on the Cold War, we'll watch The Hunt for Red October, because it's a terrific Cold War film. But we have to get to that, and we got to do World War II first. So we'll do the peace, the negotiations of the peace, watch movies. We got other activities, etc., mayhem, craziness, and weirdness on our next class, which is the 10th of January 10. It's January 10.
And that's a live class?
And it is a live class, live and in person. Mr. C Unplugged, live and in person.
Mr. C.
January. Yes.
Do you think when we have finished World War II, do you think we would be able to watch The Boy in the Striped Pajamas? Have you seen that one?
Yes.
So good.
Yes, it is outstanding. La Vita è Bella, Life is Beautiful, is probably my very, very favorite World War II movie ever. But it's achingly sad. I did see Hacksaw Ridge the other day, which is one of the bloodiest movies I've ever seen, but then it's a war film. But also one of the most inspiring films ever. So inspiring. This is about a guy named Desmond Doss who went to war, although he refused to carry a weapon. The only 2 times in his life that he ever was willing to touch a weapon was, 1, when he took someone's rifle and used it to splint the leg of his sergeant, and 2, when he, while lying on a stretcher being carried off the battlefield, reached out and swatted a German grenade away with his bare hand. Those are the only 2 times that he ever touched a weapon during the war. Oh my gosh, this guy's story is impossible. Yes, he's a conscientious objector. He believed that God did not want him to kill anyone, so he didn't. He's the only conscientious objector ever to win the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's an incredible film. It is insanely bloody. Like, insanely bloody and horrible in that way. And yet, I mean, there's 0 to hardly any swearing. There is 0 nudity, sex. There's none of that kind of thing. We don't have any of that stuff in it. So it's not R for language, and it's not R for nudity. It's R for violence. But it's war violence. It's what happens in the freaking war. Like, I don't know how you're supposed to show the battle he was in if people's body parts will get blown off. I mean, I don't know how you're supposed, that's what happens. He was a medic. It seems like it's really hard to show the story of a medic if no one is bleeding. Like, what's he supposed to do?
It's like Master and Commander. There's like that one part where they're like pretty much removing the bullet out of someone's side.
I mean,
also, are we free?
Are you free? Like, can you leave if you want?
Yes.
Yes, you can. You can always leave if you want. What? I don't have like a smite button here where I can shock you through the keyboard if you try to. Like, of course you can leave. You can leave anytime you want. Did you not know that? The only reason you guys are here is because you don't think you can leave?
Are you?
Oh my gosh!
No, I'm here because I want to be here.
I'm glad you seriously. If you go, you can go. It's fine.
Mr. C, I
do need Smeagol to make me the host again, though.
in my letter that I wrote from the perspective of a VAD nurse,
Yes.
She talks about how there's like an ever-expanding carpet of blood.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. That was very good.
Yeah.
You know what? Don't worry about it. I think I got it.
I finally sent the finished.
If you go to my picture, by the way, Elizabeth, if you go to my picture, there's the little blue box with the 3 dots. If you click that, one of the options will be make him host. No, do not hand the hostage to anybody else. Have you ever paid attention to the thing I just noticed, which is hostage and hostage are spelled exactly the same? So if you are the host, you can take hostages. Wait, don't they make Twinkies? Oh no, that's hostess. Oh, right. It's host, not hostage. Right. It's like, okay. Adios, Phantom. So it's on the 10th of January, not the 1st of January. Are you kidding me? The 1st of January is for sleeping because you didn't go to bed. And watching football, because there's a lot of football. Come on. Blake, come on, dude. Football. It's an American tradition. Trial by combat. It's what we do. Ken is like, no.
Baseball's where it's at.
I do love baseball. I got a problem with baseball. I just don't like playing baseball in January. Baseball's a summer game. The bat, man, the bat hurts when you hit the ball in January. That stings, man. Ice hockey is also great. I'm a Capitals fan. I like ice hockey. Josh, why do you keep raising your hand? Why don't you just talk?
I don't know. I try not to be rude.
Oh, that's very nice. You have my permission to just.
Well, I can leave now and go prepare for my competition tomorrow. I finished my picture for you. That's why I'm allowed to leave now.
Oh, that's awesome. Picture. Well done. What is this way you to tell me about this competition now? Ah!
It's a Lego robotics competition.
Oh, you're doing that. I heard about that.
Yeah. I'm on a Lego robotics team and one of the big actual robotics teams. So
sweet.
The Lego competition is tomorrow morning.
Crush the opposition.
Not ready.
Show no mercy.
Yeah. I plan to make it state.
Show no mercy.
I will, Mr. C. Now I'll remember you when I do it.
You know what? But seriously, send me an email when you're done. I want to know how it went.
All right. Will do. See y'all later.
All right, people. The time has come to say goodbye to all our family. Yes, McKenna, that's right. The lonely tear trickling down our cheek.
Bye.
Goodbye. Adrian, I'm glad you were here like the whole class this time. That was pretty awesome. I know you're usually listening, but I don't usually get to see you.
Well, I like to listen. Sometimes.
I'm glad you do. I like having you there. Hey, Viv.
Hello.
I get to see you. I didn't get to see you the whole time. I just saw your name all the time, which is fine. I like your name. It's beautiful, but it's not as pretty as you are.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Have a Merry Christmas, will you, please?
You too.
Remember, Mr. C sees you when you're sleeping, and he knows when you're awake.
He'll sneak into your house at night, and all your gold he'll take.
The duck is always watching you.
Yes.
Like, I can't remember the name of that phobia now.
The duck is watching.
I can't remember the name of that phobia now.
Good to see.
The duck is always watching.
What?
Maybe you'll have a whiter Christmas than your Thanksgiving.
Boy, I hope so. We've been pretty good. Last 4 or 5 years, we've had at least a little dusting of Merry Christmas. I honestly was very thankful for all of you on Thanksgiving, and it just would not be the holidays would not be so awesome if I didn't know that right after the holidays I get to see you all again. So
Next time I see my friends, I'm gonna tell them I'm in an underground legion.
that's right, Mr. C's Underground Legion.
We need to make them a
legion.
Yeah, we do. We need to come up with like secret handshakes and codes and stuff.
handshake, codes, salutes.
Riding dragon.
Uniforms.
Uniform. Oh, I'm actually altering my dad's old uniform so that I can wear it myself.
Cool.
Yeah. I have to take all the brown.
Saturday phobia. That's what it is. Thank you. Oh, thank you, William. I don't have the fear that I'm being watched by a duck. I have the fear that I can't remember the name of the fear of being watched by a duck. Is that a natidaphobia? I think that's what that is.
Next time we meet, I'm bringing a duck stuffed animal or something. And I'm going to hide it.
That's like that ridiculously creepy elf on a shelf thing.
No, you just put it in the corner of the room. And
Have you seen the Studio C elf on the shelf?
Yes.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Me and another kid.
The demonic elf on a shelf? Oh yes. Oh yes.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
And the mom comes in and she's like, "What's going on here?" And she's like,
right.
Grab the chair.
"Shouldn't I get broke?"
Just walks out.
That one was pretty crazy. There are also a couple of pretty good Studio C sketches about World War II that would be fun to do. So. All right, people.
I like the one where they're getting letters.
There was one.
I haven't seen that one.
I think it's the new one, and he was trying to get a message to his wife, and each time, like, the person who got the message would get shot.
Oh,
and then it eventually
right.
became a
Yes.
bird.
I haven't seen that one. Everybody tells me about that one. I've got to go back and I've got to hunt that one up. I haven't seen that one. Okay, people, gotta let you go.
I miss Sophie.
Toodle doodle.
Goodbye.
Muppet arms.
Bye. Bye. Farewell. Farewell. Bye. So long. Farewell.